Welcome to our meditation class. We're in a series on uh, Buddhist answers to life's most difficult questions. So important that we think about these uh, questions about life. And today's topic is going to be what happens when we die. And I think that is one of life's biggest questions. But before we begin our teaching, as always, we're going to have a meditation so that we can learn to train our mind to meditate in a very specific way so that we gain the power to make changes in our mind. That's what is special about Buddhist meditation, is it's not just for relaxation or reduction of stress, but actually allows us to increase our mental peace and happiness and decrease the unpleasant feelings that we all have within our mind. And if we wish, we can use Buddhist meditation to increase our realizations, moving towards perfecting our human qualities and attaining permanent liberation from suffering and the full state of bliss called enlightenment. So how wonderful. So anyone can use these teachings to improve their daily life, and we can use these teachings to prepare for our future lives and to make progress in our spiritual development. So the system that we use involves going from contemplation to single-pointed concentration, and then back to contemplation, and then to single-pointed concentration. And we break this up into 4 easy steps: seeking and finding an object of meditation that's beneficial for us and beneficial for others. We call it a virtuous object. So we always have a specific object of meditation. We're not just letting our mind wander or just simply observing our thoughts, unless that's part of a specific meditation, but it's not the entire meditation. And we have these very specific objects. Some are helping us to prepare for meditation, like the meditation we're going to do today, because it's very easy to use this meditation to train our mind to concentrate for longer and longer periods of time. So the steps are seeking and finding our object of meditation, then holding our object of meditation in the center of our attention in a relaxed but definite way, and remaining focused on our object of meditation for as long as possible so that we can mix our mind deeply with it. Then, if we follow a distraction in our mind and lose our object of meditation, the moment we notice, we release our attention from that distraction, and we go back again through the steps of seeking and finding our object of meditation, then holding it in the center of our attention, relaxing but staying focused on our object for as long as possible, which we call remaining. It doesn't matter how many times we have to do this in any one meditation, and we don't want to compare this meditation session with that meditation session. If we just are sincerely trying to follow these steps of meditation, we're creating the causes for mental peace, whether our meditation session is full of distractions or whether we actually can experience some concentration in our meditation session. So we never worry about what happened in a meditation session as long as we're trying to follow these steps and putting forth the effort to do so. So our object of meditation today will be the feeling that our breath is making just inside the tip of our nose as we keep our breathing normal and natural. It's really not about breathing, it's about the feeling that our breath is making, which is a little bit cooler as we breathe in and a little bit warmer as we breathe out. This is a wonderful object of meditation because it's always there, since we're always breathing. And when we seek and find it, which takes very little time, chances are you've already found it, or you may be familiar with this meditation from listening to other classes. Then what we spend most of our time in this meditation doing is trying to focus on our breath, relaxing our mind, but staying focused on it as we ignore everything else that's appearing to our mind. Other things will appear to our mind, we just don't want to pay any attention to them. We want to stay focused on the feeling of our breath. And the longer we can do that, the more we'll feel as if we're in the midst of that feeling of our breath. And other things that are happening in our mind will seem to go to the background of our mind, and we'll begin to experience some mental peace. And the longer we can stay focused, the stronger that mental peace becomes. But again, if you find that you're thinking some other thought, we just simply release our attention from that other thought and go back through the steps. This is the same way that you have to train when you're learning a musical instrument. You have to play the same piece over and over and over again to train your fingers how to use the keyboard, for example. And eventually, the song sounds the way it's supposed to. And eventually, if you keep following the steps of meditation, your mind will learn how to stay focused in single-pointed concentration. And the longer you can, the more power you gain to make changes within your mind. So how wonderful. Okay. So with those instructions, let's find a comfortable meditation posture with our back straight. That's actually quite important. And if you're in a chair, have your feet firmly planted on the floor, not in any cross-legged position, because you want your body to be supported in a very stable way. If you can sit cross-legged in a chair, that's perfectly fine. Or if you're on a cushion, have your hips higher in the back than in the front. In any cross-legged position that's comfortable is appropriate. And if you can get into half Vajra with one foot on the opposite thigh, it's a very stable meditation posture. But we don't want it to produce pain, because that will be a distraction in your meditation. So only if it's comfortable. Then you want your hands in the traditional meditation posture of right hand over left with thumbs touching, tucked close to your abdomen, the tradition that fully qualified Buddhist meditators have used since the time of Buddha Shakyamuni. We want our head well balanced over our straight back, tilted down just a little bit, with our eyes looking down the bridge of our nose in a comfortable way, and either being lightly closed, or if you have very stable eyelids, a little bit open, letting some light in so that you remain alert during meditation. And you want to place your tongue resting against the back of your upper teeth so that your mouth will remain moist during meditation. Just check for any points of discomfort and make any little adjustments you need to. The next step is to create a mental intention. We want to follow the steps of meditation, seeking, finding, holding, and remaining, so that we can gain power to make changes in our mind, to bring mental peace and happiness within our mind that we can use to benefit others throughout our day. And with this mental intention, Using your imagination, try to place your awareness at your heart center, which is in the center of your body at the level of your heart, not your biological heart. And you'll discover that you can observe your thoughts from this location because it's the location of our root mind. From among the many thoughts and sensations that appear to your mind, seek and find the feeling that your breath is making just inside the tip of your nose as you keep your breathing completely normal. And once you find it, hold it in the center of your attention in a relaxed way and remain focused on it for as long as possible while you ignore everything else appearing to your mind. Pause for a moment to enjoy whatever greater mental peace you've created within your mind. This mental peace is an indication of our completely pure nature, our completely pure potential. And it connects us, if we wish, to holy beings. And we can open our heart to receive their blessings in the form of lights and nectars in our imagination. And we want to dedicate so that we and all living beings can attain mental peace in the midst of suffering, and that we can gradually transform our mind into a pure mind so that our world transforms into a pure world. And trying to sustain whatever mental peace you've created, we can gently come out of meditation. Now I think we're fully prepared to look at what happens when we die. So I'm teaching from two books, Living Meaningfully and Dying Joyfully, and Joyful Path of Good Fortune. Both books have been kindly authored by our lineage holder, who is in the picture over in this direction, fully realized Mahayana meditation master in this modern time, presenting Buddhist teachings in a modern way that we can understand and apply in our busy daily lives. So what happens when we die? So in our society, death and dying is one of those taboo subjects. Everyone knows it's happening every day, and we particularly know right now with the coronavirus pandemic and the news. But we tend to think it's not going to happen to me. And because we have this attitude, which basically is often unspoken in our mind, but it's basically, I will not die today. We also feel that our friends and relatives will also not die today. Day after day, we think this way. So when we or someone close to us receives a fatal diagnosis or dies suddenly, such as many people are dying now from the coronavirus, we're completely unprepared. And as a result, we experience very intense grief. And this can sometimes turn into depression, particularly now when families can't be together if someone's hospitalized with serious effects of COVID and perhaps even intubated and then may eventually die. And the most we can do is have a brief Zoom meeting that a nurse arranges. And then even the funeral is truncated and difficult. So if we examine our attitudes in the light of what's true for our human condition, we will see that there's a large disconnect between what we think is true for everyone else, namely that others die, and what we believe is true for ourselves and our families, which is we should never die, or we don't think about it. So we need to challenge that type of thinking in our mind. You can just check it out for yourself. How often do you think about your death? And are you preparing for your death? And how often do you think about others that you know dying? And are you preparing for their deaths? So the seventh Dalai Lama said, and this is in both Joyful Path of Good Fortune and Living Meaningfully, Dying Joyfully, after our birth, we have no freedom to remain even for a minute. We head towards the embrace of the Lord of Death like an athlete running. We may think we are among the living, but our life is the very highway of our death. So if we really contemplate that, we'll see that it's completely true. From the moment we're conceived, we're aging. And aging never stops. It's momentary and permanent. It's happening instant by instant by instant. So the inevitable result for all of us is death. And yet we don't really know when the time of our death will be or what the circumstances of our death will be. So from a Buddhist point of view, and I think from everyone's point of view, Buddhist or non-Buddhist, it is extremely important to prepare for death because the thoughts we have when we are actively dying produce the karmic potentialities that determine our next rebirth. What form will we be born into, what environment, what family, what situation, everything is determined by the karmic potentialities that produce experiences at the time when we're dying. Buddha taught that we go through the cycle of impure life, aging, sickness, death, and uncontrolled rebirth, life after life, endlessly, unless we make progress in our spiritual path and eventually attain permanent liberation from suffering. How wonderful. Therefore, Buddhists strive to make this life meaningful by performing actions that will give us protection from the suffering in our future lives. We feel it's really important to abandon actions that harm others because, as you learned in our last class, that produces our future suffering. And we change what we do to actions that benefit others, which will result in our future happiness. So, as I said in our last class, a vast spiritual practice is to harm the delusions in our mind, the distortions, the unpeaceful states of mind that cause us for our mind to be uncontrolled and for us to harm others. So we harm our delusions as much as possible, and we benefit others. That means every living being, not just humans, animals too. We benefit others as much as possible because this results in our future happiness. And we also have this opportunity to purify our minds of negativity so that less suffering will appear later in this life and in our future lives. So when we're actively dying, our thoughts and the actions motivated by these thoughts ripen certain potentialities, which means that they cause these potentialities to produce their results, and therefore it is extremely important to prepare for death while we're still healthy, because we want to become extremely familiar with the death process and be able to keep our mind peaceful and happy while we're dying. If we can keep our mind peaceful and happy, then positive karma will ripen. This means that we do not want to be clinging onto our body, our relatives, our possessions, or our environment. Okay? Because if we are clinging to these out of attachment, our mind will be unpeaceful as we start to die. And we can't be guaranteed what our relatives who may be near us when we're dying are going to do. They may be weeping out of attachment, begging us not to die. They may be fighting over our possessions. I mean, all sorts of things happen because they don't realize we can still hear. And even if they do realize we can still hear, they don't have very much control over their behavior. So it's not uncommon for people to weep and beg those who are dying not to die. But nobody has control over that. We won't have control over it, and nobody else has control over it. When it's our time to die, we're going to die. So we need to be forward thinking in our mind. You know? So to understand the death process, we have to understand our mind. Buddha taught that there are 3 levels of mind. Our waking mind, which hopefully we're all using right now. Hope you're not going to fall asleep in this teaching. The subtle mind, that is our dreaming mind. So if you do fall asleep, you may start to have some dreams, which will seem completely real to you. And our very subtle mind, which is also called our root mind or our indestructible mind or our continuously residing mind. So this is the mind that goes from life to life. It's the only mind we take with us. It's our mental continuum. And the only thing that it takes with it is all of the results of our actions, which all start with our mental intentions. So our karmic potentialities reside in this root mind, or very subtle mind, that go from life to life. So we experience these 3 levels of mind every day and night. Now at bedtime, our waking mind, which is shuts down and our whole world disappears. And then we start to dream, and a whole new world appears to us that seems every bit as real as the world that we left. And when we're dreaming, we don't realize generally that we're in a dream. And everything seems completely real, and we're trying to accomplish things. We run into people and animals, and we travel and so forth. And then something happens. We call it waking up. But between dreaming initially, when we fall asleep, and dreaming towards the end of sleeping, is a period of time when our mind and memory is completely blank, unless we're a very advanced meditator. And that is the time when our root mind is manifesting, and its nature is bliss. Unfortunately for us, we don't recognize it. But fully realized meditation masters who have been able to stay mindful during these phases of sleep all have that experience of experiencing this blissful root mind. Then the process starts reversing itself, and the subtle mind, the dreaming mind, appears again, and then we have dreams prior to waking up. And sometimes we're in the midst of a dream and we wake up and we don't know what happened until we realize we were dreaming and now we're awake. So our subtle mind stopped functioning, therefore the dream disappeared. Now our waking mind is functioning, and now our waking world is appearing. So we go through this cycle day and night until we die, and finally we go through the cycle in this life one more time. At the time of death, our body elements begin to collapse as the waking mind is dissolving into a more subtle mind. This is when we're actively dying. These elements are the earth, water, fire, and wind elements, which represent the solidity of our body, the liquidity of our body, the heat of our body. in the movement of our body. So all of these elements begin to dissolve. So when during this dissolution, we create the last mental intention and thought of this life, and it's that mental intention and thought that produces our next life, the form of our next life, and all the circumstances of our next life. So unfortunately, if that mental intention is negative through grasping at our body or grasping at our relatives or possessions or friends, or being very angry that we're dying, or very upset with what our relatives are saying and so forth, then that anger will produce negative karma that may produce for us an animal rebirth, for example. On the other hand, if we die, train ourselves, because we do have to practice this, train ourselves to die with a peaceful mind in a state of refuge. For Buddhists, that state of refuge is in the mind of a Buddha. We call it the Dharmakaya. So you place your own mind within the mind of a Buddha. We go for refuge to Buddha's teachings by having practiced dying peacefully. And we are forward thinking. We have spent time reducing our attachments to our friends, relatives, possessions, environment, body, and so forth, so that we're not distressed that we're leaving them at this point. Particularly important to do that because we have no choice. We have no choice about dying. The Lord of Death, of course, is a metaphor. It's an analogy for the death process. But in fact, once we are dying, there isn't any choice about dying. Some people have near-death experiences, but they weren't actually, it wasn't their karma ripening for them to die at that point in time. But when we're actually dying and our karma is ripening for us to die, there's no choice but to die. So we might as well prepare for it and prepare to die peacefully in a state of refuge. I mean, other religions also have their states of refuge in terms of what they think happens after death. And it's no matter what spiritual path you personally follow, it's very important to prepare for death, to die peacefully. So for Buddhists, that means going for refuge to Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. And going into the Dharmakaya, and we've generally made stainless prayers about the type of rebirth we would like to have. And we've purified our negativity, and we've increased our positivity, and we've practiced dying over and over and over again. And we're very motivated to go to a specific place, either to another precious human rebirth where we can continue our spiritual path, where we can meet our own tradition and our own spiritual guide. For us, that's the living Je Tsongkhapa, whatever form he'll be in our next life. Or we create the causes, I should say or, because I think it's good to create causes for both types of rebirth, to go to what's known as a Buddha's Pure Land. So that's very important place. If we are lucky enough, in other words, we have lots of positive karma and we've done the preparations to go to Buddha's Pure Land, and we die with a mind of compassion towards living beings, such as all the other living beings that are dying, then we have this opportunity to create the cause, to go to a Buddha's Pure Land where we will attain liberation from suffering. And we'll be in a body of pure light, and we'll be receiving teachings from the Buddha of the Pure Land. And we can increase our realizations and then choose our place of rebirth to continue our spiritual path towards enlightenment. But we'll want to come back. We'll want to come back into perhaps this human realm out of compassion for the suffering that humans and animals are experiencing in this world, to try to relieve that suffering. Or if we're practicing highest yoga tantra, we can be reborn in the highest yoga tantra pure land of Kyajra. For example, in our tradition, we practice the highest yoga tantra of Heruka and Vajrayogini, and we can actually attain enlightenment in that pure land. So the choices are quite wonderful if we really prepare for our death. And at the very least, we can create the causes for another fully qualified, precious human life where we are born in a country where our tradition exists and we meet our tradition, our spiritual guide, and we can continue practicing. So it makes a lot of sense to prepare for our death in this way. If you're in a different tradition, you can prepare to go to the place that is desirable from your tradition. So I think that everyone needs to prepare for their death. So we have many meditations, guided meditations in our tradition. Some of them are chanted meditations that help us to prepare for the death process and help us to try to achieve a Buddha's pure land. So how wonderful. So what I'd like to do with the rest of our time is to actually guide a meditation of the dying process so that you can have some experience with what will happen when you die. And hopefully this will motivate you to think seriously about your death and to make preparations. There's a meditation we have in Buddhism, it's in the New Meditation Handbook, which helps us to change our attitude from not thinking about death or thinking I'm not going to die today, but usually I think we don't even think, we just assume we're not going to die today. So we just immerse ourselves in our daily worldly activities. And many people, even aging people, they don't want to think about death. They just feel like they're going to live forever. They don't prepare for their death. And when they actually do start to die, get very upset about it, which is very sad because that precipitates the ripening of this negative karma that propels them into rebirths of such greater suffering. And they just are ignorant. They don't know that they're doing that. And they haven't prepared their mind for dying because their greatest wish has been to be immortal. And of course, nobody's immortal. The richest people die. The most powerful people die. The poorest people die, and everyone in between dies. So there's no choice about it. So it's much better to prepare for dying. So this meditation helps us to think, I may die today, so I have to use today. If this were my last day, what do I want to do with it? And it fuels our spiritual development because it helps us to recognize, reduce, and eliminate delusions from our mind, unpeaceful states of mind, harmful intentions, the minds that cause us to suffer, like irritation, annoyance, finding fault, blaming, depression, sadness, fear, anxiety, stress, and so forth. All of those thoughts, which are accompanied by these types of feelings, are our delusions. And so we can spend each day opposing them, trying to recognize them, trying to reduce them, and eventually, as we gain more power, more spiritual power, we can actually eliminate them. And at the same time, we try to build minds through the power of meditation that lead us to keep our intentions beneficial for longer and longer periods of time, such as the mind of equanimity, a warm and friendly feeling towards everyone we think about or meet, or the mind of affectionate love, where we have a warm heart and feel close to everyone that we think about and that we meet, and then eventually cherishing everyone we think about or that we meet, and um, having universal compassion towards everyone without exception, because everyone is suffering. And so these minds are taking us on our path to permanent liberation from suffering and full enlightenment. So it's very important, this thought, I may die today, really kickstarts our spiritual practice. And it's true, because we don't know what day we're going to die. I mean, any of us could have a sudden heart attack, or we could catch COVID and have a bad outcome, a death outcome from COVID. You know, we could have an aneurysm pop. We could develop cancer or find out that we have a form of cancer that's not treatable. There's so many illnesses and ways. We could have an automobile accident. You know, that's a fatal automobile accident. So we just don't know when the time of our death is going to be. So this is a very wonderful way to think that our mind, you know, that we may die today, so I have to use this day in a meaningful way. I have to make my life meaningful. Okay, so we're going to engage in liberating prayer, and I'm going to spend the rest of the session guiding a long meditation, guiding us through the death process. So find a comfortable position, a meditation position with your back straight, your hands comfortably in your lap. As you listen to liberating prayer, just stretch your imagination and imagine that you could have these perfect human qualities that enlightened beings have. I mean, millions of men and women have been able to attain permanent liberation from suffering in the state of full enlightenment over the last 2,600 years, and it's still possible today to do so. So if we can imagine it, we can do it. But if we don't imagine it, then we can't do it. So just stretch your imagination as you listen to the good qualities, and if you wish, you can make prayers, and you can open your mind to receive blessings through this prayer to the founder of Buddhism. And as I pointed out, he's not the only Buddha. There are countless living beings who have become enlightened beings, and their job description is to help all of us to be able to do the same. Okay, so find that comfortable meditation position, and after the prayer, I'll guide the meditation.
O Blessed One, Shakyamuni Buddha, precious treasury of compassion, bestower of supreme inner peace, you who love all beings without exception, are the source of happiness and goodness, and you guide us to the liberating path. Your body is a wish-fulfilling jewel. Your speech is supreme purifying nectar, and your mind please give me the light of your wisdom to dispel the darkness of my mind and to heal my mental continuum. Please nourish me with your goodness, that I in turn may nourish all beings with an unceasing banquet of delight. Through your compassionate intention, your blessings and virtuous deeds, and my strong wish to rely upon you. May all suffering quickly cease, and all happiness and joy be fulfilled, and may holy Dhamma flourish forevermore.
So please contemplate the following. I will definitely die. Whether through sickness or by accident. And I may die in the hospital or a hospice center, or perhaps even at home with hospice care. When I become ill, I will be taken to the hospital. And at first, my doctor may think that he or she can cure me. Eventually, he or she will give up hope and stop seeing me. When my relatives find out that the doctor has given up hope, they will feel helpless and distressed. But all they will be able to do is weep and try to hold my hand. As I begin to die, my body will lose its warmth. And I will start to find it difficult to breathe. My body will become weak and shrunken. And I will not be able to hear sounds properly or see forms clearly. Gradually, if my friends and relatives are standing around me, I will not recognize them. My tongue will become short so that I cannot speak coherently. And gradually, my memory will fade. But before it has completely disappeared, I will realize I am dying. And if I have not prepared for death, I will become deeply distressed. I will think desperately how wonderful it would be if I could live longer, and will inwardly beg my friends and relatives to help me. But they will become completely powerless. Alternately, if I have prepared for death, I will apply my spiritual practice and go for refuge. Placing my mind in Buddha's mind, which pervades all phenomena. And remain peaceful, looking forward to a good rebirth. The earth element of my body dissolves, and I will have an internal sign, a mirage-like appearance to my mind. Next, the water element dissolves as all the liquids of my body decrease. I will experience a smoke-like appearance to my mind. As the warmth of my body decreases, I will experience an internal sign, like sparkling fireflies, appearing to my mind. As I can no longer move, because the wind element is dissolving, I will experience a candle flame-like appearance in my mind. This appearance is the last waking mind that I will ever have in this life. But my mind continues to dissolve. And in my subtle mind, I'll perceive a white appearance. And as my mind becomes more subtle, there will be a red appearance. And finally, as my mind is even more subtle, I'll have the mind a black appearance, black near attainment. At this stage, I will have no memory. And since I have no physical movement, no heartbeat, and no movement in my channels, most people think this is the end of dying. But my consciousness has not yet left the body. The mind of black near attainment transforms into the very subtle mind, perceiving the clear light of death, a clear, bright appearance, like the light of dawn. This is the sign that the most subtle mind, my mental continuum that resides at my heart, has manifested. The indestructible drop which contains that mind opens, and my consciousness immediately departs from my old body that no longer is functional. And my mind becomes less subtle, and I find myself in the intermediate state, a dreamlike state, in the form that determines my next rebirth. I have no awareness of my past life, my previous friends and relatives or environment, enjoyments, possessions, and so forth. My mind is being propelled into my next rebirth according to the karmic potentiality that ripened near the end of the time when I was conscious. So considering that this will happen to you, create a strong determination to gain death awareness, thinking, I may die today, and to prepare now to die peacefully in a state of refuge. And hold that in the center of your attention for a few moments to try to make that determination as strong as possible. And we can dedicate so that we do gain the motivation to prepare to die peacefully and to create the causes for a fortunate rebirth in our next life. And we dedicate so that each and every living being can attain permanent liberation from suffering and lasting pure peace and happiness. Thank you very much for attending. I hope this has been meaningful for you. Now we have to put our determination into practice in our daily life, taking to heart that we do not know when the time of our death will come, but it is definite that we will die. So perhaps it could be today. I may die today. So I need to prepare now for my next rebirth. I need to give myself the kindness of good conditions in my next rebirth. I need to learn how to die peacefully, how to recognize, reduce, and abandon my delusions, harm our delusions as much as possible, and benefit others as much as possible. It's such a vast spiritual practice. So, as always, we are making prayers for you and your family and all living beings for health and safety in this very difficult time.